Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and money-colored commentator. On today's show, portfolio planning, part 5 in our series on saving for retirement in your working years. Well, welcome everyone to the 5th segment. We're talking about portfolio planning. In the last segment, we actually talked about it in actual risk terms, aggressive, moderate, conservative. This time I want to talk a little bit more about time and how we do mixing. And sometimes I like the 2 or 3 dimensional approach and using some on the background, maybe even some Monte Carlo theory kind of modeling to see what kind of numbers I can look at and see if I feel good about that in relation to risk. Why should I take all this risk if I don't really have any decent returns? So I always want to kind of measure risk and return. It's a place we live in, and I want to look at it from a time point of view. I also want to look at it from my psychological profile: aggressive, moderate, conservative, just 3 of the many possibilities in those categories. So let's look at our time. Looking ahead, 30 years until you need the money. Like I said, when I look back at 30 years and see where I need to be today, I got to tell you, boy, I had to start putting money away in my 30s. I was kind of late to the game, but once I got going on it. Remember, one of the big bad things about time is that if you think you have plenty of time, you don't. There are people in America, 34% of Americans don't even have $1,000 in their emergency fund. 25% of baby boomers don't have hardly any money in their retirement. Now, all of a sudden, the time is not on their side. It's now a predator. It's going to take them out. They didn't put enough money aside. Procrastination is probably the #1 issue, more than even the market corrections that'll go out throughout your life. You have to start early. You have to give yourself money for your retirement. I say pay yourself first before you pay any bill, and pay it into your future. Now, let's look at 30 years. When I'm looking at 30 years, look at the mix that's changed here. My stocks are 80%. Stocks have the potential to grow in value over time and may even pay dividends. Also, I might be in my bond account, 15%. Bond insurers pay interest, usually on a regular schedule, and promise to repay principal at maturity. So I might be looking at bonds, 15% position. And then in cash, 5% cash. I might just want to have some liquidity. Some mutual funds, of course, are already in cash if you're buying funds. So you should look at every fund you see to see how much they're invested. If it's only 5%, I'm kind of good with that. If they're 25, 30% in cash, that means you're not fully invested and you're still paying costs for that. I say that's not the way to go, especially if I have 30 years. I shouldn't even be talking about stuff like that. Now, I want to look at also 12 years. If I'm 12 years out, notice that I have to start changing positions because of time. Remember, time is not my friend. I went from 30 to 12. I already cut my timeline in half. So it's 60%. I'm starting to gradually reduce my asset allocation from portfolio volatility to a little bit more predictable volatility. Now remember, it's nothing truly, you're in the market, you're still exposed to risk, you could lose it all. But looking at it, I'm trying to make the proper moves as my timeline gets shorter. In this case, it's 12 years. 60% in my stocks, 30% in bonds, 10% in cash. Now all of a sudden, and a lot of my baby boomer brethren are right here on this timeline right now. Remember, every day, 10,000 boomers are retiring. Unbelievable. Look at that number. 5 years out. I saw an article by the Prudential who said that the danger zone in retirement is 5 years before you retire and 5 years after. They call it the red zone in a football analogy. Once you get within that 20 or that 5 or 10 year instrument, you want to score a touchdown. Sometimes you're only allowed to make a 3-point field goal. You're starting to get into crunch time now, where time really matters. Look what happens. I went from 30 years down to 5. I'm 25 years loss, and now my portfolio spread is 40% stocks, 40% bonds, and 20% cash, because now I'm getting closer and closer to retirement. I cannot take a hit like we took in 2008, which was not a correction, which was not a bear market. It was a black swan event. Those are odd events that happen in our timeline that nobody could predict, nobody saw coming. And on top of the black swan event of 2008 with the market meltdown, we also had the housing market meltdown, their market meltdown. So the combination was lethal to many boomers. And some of us are just recovering even today. So I want to look at this from a strictly timeline point of view. The preceding segment, we looked at it strictly on our risk tolerance. Sometimes you'll say, hey, my timeline and my risk tolerance is matching up. And that's what you want to do. You want to get a kind of a multidimensional approach and have a good financial advisor that actually knows what he's talking about to escort you through the learning process. Remember, in my view, if your financial advisor isn't an educator, find somebody else. There's fine people that have tons of experience, that are very honest people, and they will take the time to teach you and walk you through these methods. I want to talk a little bit about diversification. When I was younger, I have to say, Steve Savant was not diversified. I saw couple aggressive funds, and I lived and died by it. Now, the good part was when the actual market was going up, just before the 2000 bubble, I was doing just fine. But I was not diversified enough, and I didn't really think it through, because I thought, I'm only sitting at around 2000, I'm only around 50 years old. What does it matter? But you can't see the future and the impact it's going to have. And I didn't diversify enough. So that's my confession for the day. Now I know that diversification is a big play in asset allocation. I can't have all my eggs in one basket, and I have to diversify. Now, I'm using this food analogy, which is just completely antithetical for me to be using it, since I don't really eat as well as my wife does. But when I'm looking at this, I want to have individual securities. You could be liking a stock and a bond that you like. Maybe you're watching Jim Cramer, and he's going, buy, buy, buy. He wants you to buy something that he thinks is good, and he has a pretty good track record. Maybe you want to look at mutual funds, which have collections of stocks and or bonds, depending upon what their target is, and you have a collection of funds. Or you like indices, foreign and domestic indices. One of the big ones in the United States is, of course, the S&P 500. 500 companies in one package, and the cost to run that is a lot less than traditional mutual funds. And then, of course, you're looking at other things like maybe annuities, something conservative, or CDs, if you want to go that way, where you have your cash positions. Word of warning. In addition to managing non-systematic risk, one of the goals of creating diversified portfolios is to provide more consistent returns. That's why we diversify. We're trying to get some predictability. We're trying to get a bit more systematic return. That doesn't mean we will. It's just that we're trying to position our portfolio so it has a possibility of doing this. Remember, anything we've done in the past, all our historical returns have nothing to do with the future, and I can't even bank on using them, even from a statistical point of view, and try to predict the performance of any fund, ETF, annuity. I can't predict any of that. So when you're looking at this, you want to have some kind of diversification. You can't have, as I have down here in one of my graphics, you can't have all your peas in one pod. You have to diversify. Think about this. I don't even like to eat green beans after the third or fourth day. You know, let's say I wanted to have vegetables. I love green beans, but you know, if you had it day in and day out, that gets tiresome, right? You want to diversify. Your palate has different appetites and different taste buds. I would like to diversify. Well, when I'm looking at basic ideas of investing, I want to be diversified so that if certain sectors are having problems, I'm going to have other sectors that aren't correlated to that, and I won't take a major hit. Now, depending upon the market, sometimes when the bond market's going up and interest rates are having their day, and we may be in that period right now, we want to be able to look at and say, hey, stocks are now a little bit problematic. We've been really doing great. We're going to take a little bit off the table. We're going to take some profits off the table, maybe start moving over to the bonds, especially if you're older like I am, heading into retirement. I always want to diversify, and I want to try to take credit risk off the table if I can. That's my goal. It depends upon how short my timeline is or how long it is, but no matter how long or short it is, I want to always be in a position of diversification. Now, I like financial planners who teach me not only asset allocation risk, am I aggressive, am I conservative, am I moderate, but I also love people who are timeline thinkers. The human experience is on a timeline, and analog timeline going forward into the future. We can't go back and fix things. Well, I guess if you could fly faster than the speed of light, I guess you can go back in time. But so far, it isn't happening. So I can't correct mistakes, money mistakes. I can only learn from them and then go forward. And one of the big money mistakes I had to learn the hard way is diversification. So when you sit down with your financial planner, tell her, I need to have my portfolio diversified as much as possible to still hit my goals and to make uncorrelated investments. So if one is hot, I still have protection in case it goes down. It's tough to get non-correlated assets in the market, but some good financial planners can always give you an idea to at least position your portfolio in the best possible way to have the lowest risk, the greatest potential for return, and you can feel a little bit at least like you're doing your homework. You're doing it on the basis of time, you're doing it on the basis of risk, and you're diversifying because you know you don't want to have all your retirement eggs in one basket. I want to thank you for watching our series on saving for retirement in your working years. And keep in mind, before moving forward with any of the ideas on the show, always check with your tax consultant, legal counsel, or financial advisor. You've been watching Steve Savant's Money, the name of the game.